Good evening. My name is Shannon Haddock, and today we are discussing a wonderful collection. And as of right now, I don't have anybody in attendance, but I am recording this because this book was so special to me. Um, this is a part of course, Stories of Exile program series, and we are continuing this through December. Um, Today's book is In the Land of the Postscript, which is a complete collection of Chava Rosenfarb's writings, short stories, translated by Goldie Morgenthaler, who is her daughter. She translated and, of course, lived through some of this and experienced a lot and talked with her mother about these stories. And later in her years, when she was translating them, got a lot of opinions from her mother. A little about Chava Rosenfarb. She was born in 1923, which makes this year her 100th, and the anniversary of her birth, 100 years ago. She was born in Lodz, Poland. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And this year, Poland has declared 2023 to be the year of Chava Rosenfarb, which is very special. She is a remarkable woman that started writing from a very, very young age. Her father encouraged her to write anything and everything about her feelings. He had two daughters. Her parents. Her father was a waiter in Poland, in Lodz, and of course, one of the heaviest influences on Chava is that her parents were part of the Jewish Socialist Bund, a left-leaning political movement, and it had a huge following amongst the working class Jews in Poland. And while Bundist ideology encouraged agitation for equal rights for Jews in Poland, it also incorporated a strong cultural element that privileged Yiddish as the language of the Jewish masses, which is this being instilled in her early on is one of the reasons that she always wrote in Yiddish. It was the language of her birth, it was the language of her family, and when she was most creative in writing, it would of course be in Yiddish. And she did write. She went to a Bundist school where all the instruction was in Yiddish, and she had Yiddish secular studies. Then, when she was entering high school age, of course, the Nazis were forming ghettos, and she and her family were sent to the Lodz ghetto. This was in 1941. She did receive her high school diploma while living in the ghetto. And every day she'd wake up at dawn and use her father's bookkeeping registers, anything she could find to write. She had various jobs after her high school graduation, but she mostly wrote on her own poetry. These things she wrote a lot to express herself, what she was experiencing, and much of that was lost, and she had to recreate some by memory later on. When the ghetto was liquidated, she and her family were sent to Auschwitz concentration camp, and later Bergen-Belsen. She nearly died of typhus when the British liberated Bergen-Belsen in 1945. She did survive, and she spent several years, which is something I'm just learning about. A lot of the people that were liberated from concentration camps could not go home. There was no home. So that a lot of them just wandered around Europe as displaced persons, DPs. She spent a lot of time in Brussels, and she started writing her, what is now known as her seminal work, The Tree of Life, which is a 3-volume novel. She started writing that after being liberated from the camp and when she was a displaced person. In 1949, she married Henrik Morgenthaler, and they immigrated in 1950 to Montreal, Canada. The bulk of In the Land of the Postscript takes place in Montreal. And I have put in the chat a link to a video of Goldie Morgenthaler talking about the influence of Montreal on her writings. A lot of these stories deal with after the Holocaust. It doesn't deal with the nitty-gritty horrors that happened in the camp, but with the aftermath, which I don't think a lot of people read about or realize. The psychology of how they came out of the camps and started new lives, how they were psychologically, how they recommitted themselves to, in a positive way, or the opposite, how people chose to live. She finally, in 1972, finished The Tree of Life, and it was nationally acclaimed, worldwide acclaimed. She was well known as a writer, and she was celebrated during her lifetime, which is wonderful. Now, as far as In the Land of the Postscript, probably the heaviest and the most influential story in the book is called Edgia's Revenge. And it's a lengthier part of the middle of the book. And honestly, Goldie, the daughter, admits that it's not her favorite. It's kind of dark, and but a lot of Chava's stories in this collection are fairly positive. How these people chose to live and everything. Edgia's Revenge is a little bit different, and I've never seen this point of view before, but it starts out, let me see, I'm going to have to go back and remember everybody's names because they don't come naturally to me because, forgive me. This was Rella. Rella is reflecting on her friendship and her conflicts with Edgia. Edgia was in the camp with her, the concentration camp. She's reflecting to that time. They are now in Montreal. And the big secret, it's not a secret to the reader, but the big secret is that Rella was actually a Chava. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. A Chava is a person who was of Jewish faith who was chosen sometimes because of their connections or their relationships or happenstance, chosen to guard or lead or discipline the camp, their barracks or whatever. They were chosen, they were prisoners themselves, of course, but they had a cushier job because their job was to keep everybody in line. And from the revelations, you realize that Rella, she ate better than the other prisoners in the concentration camp. She started a sexual relationship with one of the guards in order to obtain this position. She saw it as her best way of surviving, which I think is the case for most people that were in these roles. I do think that probably, as with human nature, those that probably enjoy being in those roles of, jailer and discipliner. But Rella talks about what she did as a capo. And one of the, she doesn't give herself too much, how do you say, she doesn't really give herself any relief. She has an enormous guilt for what she's done. She did a lot of bad things to her fellow Jews during this role. The one thing that she remembers best is during roll call, one of the girls was missing, and this was Egia. Egia was missing, so Rella goes looking for her and happens upon her in the latrine. She's hiding, and she's, near death, sick, begging for her life. And Rella, for some reason, that day, decides to hide her instead of report her. So, in Rella's mind, this is the one thing she did right in the prison camp. Egia, she ends up going on another cattle car to either another camp, I can't remember specifically, but in Rella's mind, it was the one thing she did right. So years later, now the camp is liberated. Rella is afraid to be caught out as a capo because one of the very first things that happens is she wanders around and ends up with other recently liberated Jews. They wait on a major road for a truck to come by and rescue them, take them someplace else. And when they do, this truck has one person like hiding in the corner in the back of the truck. And the people who get on the truck recognize him as a capo, and they beat him, and they throw him off the truck. Egia jumps off the truck and runs. She knows now that that's going to be her fate if anybody finds out she's a capo. She hides and eventually gets to Montreal, and she knows she's never going to marry, never going to have children, because she holds all of this shame and guilt within her. She, meets up with Egia and her new husband in Montreal. They've resettled there. And I'm sorry, I'm looking for her husband's name, Egia Lolek. And Lolek are married and live in Montreal. And they meet up, Egia and Rella. And Rella says to her, you can't ever tell anyone I was a capo. I will tell them about the shameful secret of you hiding in the toilet. She holds sway over her, and she becomes friends with Egia's friends. And a lot of the story talks about how she escapes her past by throwing herself into modernity and modern taste and literature and art and theater, music. She does everything she can to cast off her past, and so do her friends. And this is kind of making me think that that's what a lot of people did. They buried their past and just grabbed life with all they could. So anyway, the story involves the evolving relationship between Egia and Rella, and Egia's change throughout the story. I won't give it away, but it's just devastating. It's really, really powerful. Another story is about a husband and wife who met after liberation, and they have a fairly good life. They have kids. They're settled in Montreal again, and the wife, this is the story is Francois. And Francois is a secret, imaginary lover, the wife. She is not getting what she needs from her husband, and she has very little in her daily life to give her an escape. So she creates this perfect French lover, and he tells her everything she needs to hear. He supports her. He compliments her. She even begs to take the car when her husband doesn't need it, and she drives around just talking to Francois. She even checks into a hotel to be alone with Francois. Her husband notices the lift in her spirits and comments on it, and she lets slip Francois's name. He goes mad. Her husband goes mad. And she's like, no, you don't understand. No, it isn't what you think it is. So she convinces him she's not having an affair. But, this happiness that Francois brings her is something that manifests itself over and over and over again. It's just, she falls for this man that is her perfect thing. And so Leon is the husband and Leah is the wife. They're getting more and more dissatisfied in their marriage, but they're successful. So they decide to go to South America. They go to Peru, they go to Argentina, and Leah, of course, takes Francois with her. And then they're finally at the final destination, which is Machu Picchu. And it's there that Leah finally gets the courage to tell Leon that she doesn't want to be married to him. She wants a life outside of this dull institution that she's had for so many years, and she is liberated. And in doing so, she doesn't need Francois anymore. It's a beautiful story. Most of the stories take place in Canada, in Montreal, in the same neighborhood even, and they're very telling on geography. She talks about, the daughter talks about the things in Montreal that were important to her mother, and she would write about them and then make appearances in different parts of books. There is one that, of course, they live in Montreal, but she is fascinated with Paris, France. So when she's dying, she asks her husband to take her to Paris, France. He's a sculptor, and his only body of work is that of his wife. He sculpts her because he loves her so much. And as he gets better as a sculptor, she gets sick or illness, and he becomes so engrossed in recreating her that I feel like, looking at the story, he loses sight of her. He takes her to Paris, and her last dying wish is to make love to a young man. And of course, her husband is just like, what are you talking about? He says, that's all I just want to see and live through the eyes of a young man. And he finds this young man who's willing to do this for him. Unfortunately, she dies during the process, and but she has this one moment of exhilaration with a young man from Paris. Beautiful story. Another one of my favorites that's meaningful in a different way is called The Masterpiece. And this one is about another couple who are survivors in Montreal. And they have a regular, kids, home, family after the war. And he is a writer, and he's working on his big masterpiece. And he works on it to the exclusion of his children and his wife. He puts his whole self, Victor, he puts his whole self into the creation of this masterpiece. So much so that his family loses out on him. His wife becomes lonely without him. And she has been secretly, because I don't know if this is typical, but most writers have a first reader, but Victor kept everything hidden. He said, I'll show it to you when it's done. Well, Sonia, his wife, secretly would go in and read his masterpiece as he was making it. And she just, it's going to be like the best novel ever. They get further and further apart as he gets further and further into the creation of this masterpiece. This masterpiece is mainly his and his wife's experience in the camps. He wants this novel to encapsulate the experiences of the Jews in the concentration camps. And she is, supportive to a point, and then they both decide to separate. Their children just, she reveals a lot of secrets about herself, including the fact that she, has been faithful to him. So as they separate, she has a feeling. She goes and copies all of the masterpiece, puts it back where it was, and hides it at their mountain cabin, hides it in a metal safe. And then, of course, she does come home one day, and he's burning the entire masterpiece, burned to a crisp, and there was no record of it because there's no computers, there's nothing like that. And she is so relieved that she made a copy and hid it. He says, I can't live like this. I can't present this masterpiece. I've lost you with the writing of this masterpiece. Anyway, he kind of loses his mind. He starts writing another masterpiece, and they decide that he's going to stay at the cabin. She's going to be at home, and as luck would have it, he starts a fire at the cabin, and he leaves his new masterpiece in his one-room apartment. And a fire starts in the cabin and burns the whole thing and burns the masterpiece. I won't tell you the rest, but what it meant to me was that there are so many masterpieces that were literally burned, that were taken from people, the stories, the histories, the everyday and the mundane and the extraordinary were erased. And they were all masterpieces. On that note, I will say that the last book, short story in the book, April 19th, is, of course, the day of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. It was the one point where the Jewish people took matters into their own hand and fought back, and it is celebrated every year. And the story is very sweet. It's a great ending. It's a great way to end the stories on a positive note. I hope that you read the book. We have copies for you to check out at the library. And our next discussion will take place on November 30th. We will be discussing the Gladstein Chronicles. This is by Jacob Gladstein, and there are two books within one book. Interesting story. I hope I get to discuss it with some of you. And then in December, we will be discussing African Town by Irene Latham and Charles Waters. This is a YA novel inspired by the true story of the last American slave ship. This, of course, is an Alabama story. It is a story of exile, and we will be discussing it on December 21st. I have other programs going on for the next few months, and it's all within this. You could find this flyer with all of the information on our website, hooverlibrary.org. I don't say enough about those that made this creation possible: the Yiddish Book Center, the Birmingham Jewish Federation, and our anonymous donor. But I want to thank them all for their commitment and their encouragement and their money that made this possible. I hope you enjoyed our talk tonight. If you want to leave a message about it, I'd be happy to receive it.